Okay, just one small tool would be using sounds to kind of trigger and train the correct neural pathways. You have to recognize your trends again. So if I've got a rider that's a little stuck and they get a little tight and they maybe need to learn how to cue faster, well, I'll make them cluck fast or kiss fast.
Welcome to Elevate Your Ride, the podcast dedicated to elevating your performance in the saddle. I'm Ellie, your personal trainer.
And I'm Lauren, your mindset coach. Today, we welcome world and Congress champion trainer Torey Roderick. Torey has had an immense amount of success herself in the show pen. Recently, she developed a passion for learning about the mental aspect of her sport. We are excited for Torey to share more about what she has learned and put into practice for her students. Torey, what was the most surprising thing you saw when you started putting more focus on the mental side of training for your riders?
The more I started experimenting with stuff with my clients, it got easier to reproduce. So the nice thing is if I found something that resonated with a student on Tuesday, I was like, "Oh, great. I'm gonna use this on Wednesday and Thursday." So I've had a lot of, like, guinea pigs. So, I don't know if my students were like, "Oh, here we go. She's got some new stuff she wants to try on us." They're pretty good sports about it, but it all kinda goes together. It helped them, it helps me. So that's fun. It's just it all goes towards the greater good, kind of.
Yeah, and can you give us an example of some of the things that you've been saying and experimenting with them lately?
It's a little bit just how you look at things. I think that there's some mental blocks that riders hit a lot. We've been doing some visualization just on a smaller scale. People talk about it a lot, like at your bigger horse shows. And I think you need to know what you're visualizing and what you're manifesting, or however you want to look at it. So I'll give you a larger example and then kind of scale it back to a daily example. I think if you're trying to have success, let's say at the Congress or the World Show, I talk to my students and I tell them it's really important to visualize your ride, not yourself standing there with the trophy and, not yourself having your picture taken. I mean, that's great, but that's like a cherry on top. You need to visualize yourself if you show the trail, doing your +1 walkovers, doing your +1 trot overs and your +1 gait and your very best transitions. So I think it's important to know what you're visualizing and then down to like a daily task or a daily visualization. I've noticed riders can really block what they're doing if they have trouble transitioning, let's say. Oh, my horse doesn't transition to the lope well. If they're thinking about it, they're going to keep creating the same thing. And I started studying the science behind that a little bit. And I think if people understand the science behind it, they can get behind an idea more instead of like kind of like, oh, voodoo, visualization. And if you can dream it, you can do it, which is all nice, but it's a little fluff. I just started kind of studying a little bit more about neural pathways and muscle memory. And I really like examples. So when I can find a book or a podcast or an audiobook or whatever that has some hard facts, real life examples of real athletes and their stories, I just love that stuff. So I just try to share what resonates with me. Not every flavor is going to work for everybody. So I just try to find something that clicks with myself and my students.
Yeah, I really like doing the visualization. That definitely has helped me when I go to show. But could you talk us through how you would teach your students to do visualization before a big show?
Sure. We do a lot of trail. That's my favorite. I guess that's what I specialize in. And a lot of our students do it. So the easiest for me to do that. So it starts with the walk. I try to, at a higher level, get my students to really walk in a 3-foot step and not just walk the path, not just know where you're going, but really walk the course and visualize yourself doing the exact maneuver. If you're on the left lead, picture yourself and what that feels like, and just stay in routine and be able to walk it and walk it and walk it until it's like driving to your house. You can't go the wrong way. It's just automatic. So I try to just encourage I try to identify when they look like they're overthinking. It can't be cognitive at that level. It has to be like open loop. It has to be automatic. It has to be easy. I think athletes at a high level, what they're doing is very much automatic. I think when we're learning stuff, it's a very cognitive process. It's very thought intensive. But if I see my students and it looks like there's smoke coming out of their ears, I'm like, hey, let it happen a little bit. You know how to lope your horse off, right? Like, you know how to trot a circle, like, let it happen. So I just try to be there and encourage them when it looks like they're in their head too much. Like, okay, like, let it be automatic, let it flow. I don't know if that really answered your question. There's so many components to it.
Yeah, yeah. So let's just say that we're given the trail pattern and you have to walk up and then do the gait. How would you tell someone what kind of things do you want them to visualize and think about, like walking up to just a gait?
So me personally, I'm always reinforcing rhythm. So the whole time I walk the course with my students, I'll count through every maneuver, just steady rhythm up to the gate. I want to tell them to look down in the dirt where they want to go, not look at the gate. You don't want to, whack your horse's foot on the gate. I guess what I run into a lot, maybe not on a show day, I run into my riders that have mental blocks based off of a previous event. Let's say like one of my youth kids had a hard time seeing her spots during championship season. We went to Ocala. She had one day she won, one day she couldn't see her spots. We went to the Congress. Her first class, she missed her spots. Second class, she could see her spots. So she was a little bit hit and miss. And finally, I said to her, "Are you worried about missing? Are you worried about seeing your spot?" She said, "Yeah, I am." So are you thinking that you're going to miss? Well, yeah, a little bit because it's been a real thing. It's happened. So I just told her, if you're worried about missing, you're going to miss because the neural pathways are going to be the same. Your body's going to recreate the same scenario that caused you to miss the first time. You're going to be a little uncertain and you're not going to be real clear to your horse. So you have to believe that you're going to get through there. You have to picture yourself loping and seeing your spot. Like if you're a downhill skier and you look at the trees, you're probably going to hit the trees. You need to look at the snow. We know if we look directly at the pole, we're probably going to hit the pole. So I try to teach my riders to look in the dirt, look at the sweet spot where you want to leave, and really just look at every bit of dirt that you want to travel through. So I encourage that. It's hard. It's hard to let go of things that have happened, but you just have to kind of store it and move on. And you have to really picture the maneuver before you do it. So you have to keep doing that visualization on a smaller scale and then string it all together for your big event. Picture yourself doing each maneuver excellent, transitioning excellent. And if you devote any bit of mental space to what could happen or what could go wrong, very frequently it happens. I know for myself it happens. I'm normally pretty confident seeing my spots, and the couple of times I've been like, "Oh, I hope I see my spot." I say, I haven't,
Mhm.
So I know firsthand that that's a real thing.
Yeah, and if somebody has struggled with, let's say, seeing their spots, do you think that being able to simply visualize over and over that you do see your spots is as effective as maybe going and practicing with your horse and actually hitting the spots every time?
I've just started exploring it. So I've started making a few of my students really walk specifically, like learn to walk in a 6-foot stride consistently. And it's happened a few times as the riders figure out how I want them to walk the course. The ones that can't see their spots when they ride can't see them when they walk.
Mm.
So I've figured out some exercises to do on the ground, which is super helpful because not every horse wants to practice for a very long time with a novice that can't see their spots. I mean, some of them are soldiers, but some of them are gonna, time out a little bit. So I mean, you can drop a broom in the aisleway, and I did this, and my one amateur, my select amateur was a really good sport. We were in Venice, and she had a new horse, and we practiced with the horse a fair bit, and he was very good, and he took care of her when she couldn't see her spots, but I know we need to work on her eye, so I dropped a broom just like it was one pole, and I made her walk a circle and just stay in that rhythm. And sure enough, "Oh, you just split. Whoop, you just chipped. Whoop," and she started to see it, and I just made her stay on it and stay on it, and then I added a pitchfork, and we were just in the field walking over pole, but she got in the rhythm, and then she could start to see it. She could see what she could see, and she could see what she couldn't see.
And that's great for people who maybe don't have access to their horses on a regular basis to at least be able to have something to do if they can't be riding every day.
Yeah, it's been good for me when I have the people at the show, and it's like, "All right, we've ridden your horse once or twice, and, your horse is done for the day, but hey, let's go work on your eye for 5 minutes. Let's go out here and just, work on your walk," And sure enough, I could see the spots, and it correlated very well to the problems she has when she shows. It was like, "Whoops, I was a little behind, I didn't quite see it. That snuck up on me." She looked at me and said, "Yeah, that's what happens when I show." So, we could recreate it a little bit without making withdrawals on the horses.
Do you visualize your own rides before you show? Like, let's say that it's the night before the trail finals at the World Show, and are you like laying in bed visualizing your pattern the next day? Like, how do you go through your own visualization process?
I don't visualize the pattern the night before when I'm practicing, when I'm on the course, like the course is usually set at least a day, sometimes more ahead of time. When I walk the course a lot. Tim was teasing me a little bit. The one year I was draw 1 in the finals, and I went off pattern, and
Oh
it
no.
actually yeah, and it actually wasn't nerves, I was just it was some serpentines, and I was bebopping around, and I, like, bopped the wrong way, and it
Oh
was
no.
go left, go right, go left, go right, and I was just into it, and I went the wrong way, and I heard, "Uh-oh." But I kept going, and, I was trying to figure out did the rest of the pattern I kept showing, and I kept trying to replay it. Did I go the wrong way? And then I had myself talked out of it. I was like, "No, I didn't." "Yeah, I did." And I looked up and they were still scoring, but I didn't realize they have to keep scoring at the world show. So I kept
Oh.
showing, and it was a real bummer. My horse was great, and that was like a huge disappointment for me, but it was still a mental thing. It wasn't nerves. Previously in my career, nerves were a problem, but it was obviously a lack of focus. So the next year, I made the finals with the same horse, and Tim was commentating. I'm not sure who, maybe Troy Compton, and they were like, Torey was the first one to arrive to the walk, and she walked the course 17 times, and she was the last one to leave the walk. Well, if you recall, Tim, she went off pattern last year. So they
Oh.
reminds me a little bit, and that's okay. But I didn't care. So I'll just walk it again and again and again and again. I started to look for any possible place that I could go the wrong way. So don't want that to happen again. But it happens to all of us for sure. So I just visualize when I walk, and I really just every moment I try to really walk in rhythm. I visualize my breakdowns. I'll turn my body a little left when I'm on the left lead. I'll turn my body a little right when I'm on the right lead. Like I try to walk it uninterrupted. So when there's a whole pack of us, you got to kind of wait and spread out and be able to get your rhythm. And I'll walk one obstacle multiple times if I need to. And I'm pretty confident if I can walk it, I can show it. The times that it doesn't walk great for me are the times that I typically don't have as much flow when I show.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for tuning in to Elevate Your Ride. We're so excited to continue helping you elevate your performance in the saddle. To keep bringing you quality content and information, we're asking you to help us. Tell your friends about us on our podcast, like and share a meaningful quote you saw on our social media, write us a review on Spotify or Facebook. You can also join our Facebook group and ask all your health and fitness questions, or maybe post a success story to motivate another amateur. Your engagement really helps us support and encourage the equestrian community. We're also inviting sponsors and supporters to help us build our show. As a sponsor, starting at just $150, you'll receive marketing on our podcast, website, and growing social media platforms for your business. It's the perfect way to connect with the equestrian community and showcase your brand to our dedicated listeners. And for our supporters, your $50 contribution gets you a shout out on our social media and website. Every bit of support really helps fuel the show and helps us inspire and motivate equestrians. So, if you're interested in learning more about that, you can scroll down to the show notes of this episode and look for the Become a Supporter or Become a Sponsor links and click on those to get some more information. Thank you for listening. We can't wait to continue expanding our platform and helping you elevate your ride.
Hey, Elevate Your Ride fans. Are you loving our show and looking for a way to show your support? Check out our line of Elevate Your Ride merchandise. From stylish t shirts to cozy hoodies to journals and hats, we have everything you need to represent your favorite podcast. Ready to gear up? Click on the Buy Our Merchandise Here link in the podcast notes, or head on over to our website, elevateyourride.co, and click on the Store tab. Thank you for your support. Make sure to like, follow, and share our platform with your friends.
So it sounds like you practice a lot more like in the moment visualization as opposed to like later on visualization, which is just a different technique than like I think I do a little bit of a mix of both. Like when I'm at a show or practicing, I do it your way, but then I also do it like when I leave the barn or when I'm in bed, I'll like visualize it even more.
Yep.
And I'll do a lot like if I have a pattern that I'm a little nervous about forgetting a spot on, I'll practice it like at home, like in my kitchen or in my living room or something like that. So I think
Yes.
that figuring out what works best for you and going with that, and that just, takes experience. So you mentioned that you had some nerves earlier on in your show career. Can you talk a little bit more about that and then how you worked through it?
Yeah, sure. At some point, we've all experienced nerves. It's important. We do this because it's important to us. If we didn't care, we wouldn't be nervous. So I think people can feel a little alienated, like, oh, I'm the only one that gets nervous. Everyone else kind of has their stuff together and so doesn't get nervous. I think the more you do it, you tend to get less nervous. And I think a lot of athletes just learn to operate with the nerves. And some people are just very comfortable there. One of my favorite books, they offer the book. He's a doctor and he works with people and he's worked with a lot of star athletes. And some of them just say, I'm comfortable there. I'm comfortable working when I know it's go time when I'm nervous. So I think that's important to know that everybody goes through it. And I sure went through it when I was younger. I grew up doing open shows, as a kid and ran through the whole gamut of open shows and then doing bigger shows and then being a professional and showing other people's horses for the first time and money and pressure and your experience builds your confidence. So when I had less experience, I had less confidence. I used to get worried. I used to do a lot of hypotheticals. What if this happens? What if that happens? And eventually the things happen and you learn how to deal with them. And then, you're not worried about it anymore. But I went to the World Show. Let's see. I think the first time in 2007, and I went several times when I worked for Jimmy and Lisa Farrell. And then I went on my own several times, and I went with a good friend of mine who showed hunters, and we had a little trip we did every year. I'd pick up one or two of her horses in New York, and we'd road trip out to the World Show. And there were a few years that I was disappointed in myself. I felt that my horses were good, my horses were ready, and I was the letdown. So that's when I really started getting into it, and we had a lot of discussions on the road trip, and my friend and I would really talk about the mental game, and over the years, she would send me podcasts or send me books, and we'd kinda send each other things, and that's really where it started for me, and I said, "I don't like that feeling. I There's a lot we can't control with horses, but I wanna do my very best to control myself." So, stuff's still gonna happen, your horse is gonna hit a pole or something's gonna spook your horse. There's a whole myriad of things that can go wrong, but I wanted to do my very best to control myself. I hated the feeling of, "Hey, I let my nerves get in the way." I didn't operate to the best of my ability because I was uptight. I was nervous. So that's where it started for me, where I started getting interested in it. So I feel like what happened is I started figuring it out. I just know the feeling when I started getting confident and I was like, I got it. And the very first year that I finally felt like I got my stuff together at the World Show, my friend and I were there. We were warming up. I had two horses in the senior trail. And she said, "What do you need?" I said, "Nothing. This horse is ready. She's on. I'm ready. I'm going." And I made it back with both horses to the senior trail. And that was, the first year that I felt like, okay, like I figured it out. I conquered some, not demons, but just got over some hurdles. And it's a constant process and a constant work. you don't get confident and just stay there. Like there's ups and downs. I don't care who you are. But as I got older and the last few years especially, I started researching again. Like I took a little break from it when things were going really good. And I was like, hey, I got this stuff kind of figured out. And then in the last couple of years, I got more interested in it again. And I realized that some of the stuff I figured out or some of the stuff that I teach is actually already in existence. It's teachable material. It's systems that, maybe sports psychologists would help you with. So I said, oh my God, that's so interesting. I wish I had known this 20 years ago. Like I wish someone had given me this roadmap or given me these ingredients. I like figured it out a little bit by myself in the kitchen, just playing with ingredients. But it was so interesting to me that there's all this, there's so much information out there like at our disposal. You just have to sort through it and find what works for you. But there's just so much of it. It's awesome.
Where do you think your go-to resources for a lot of this information?
So I have a couple of favorite books. The Confident Mind by Dr. Nate Zimser, and he's coached Olympian Eli Manning, and I love all the real life stories. I learn better by example. I remember stories, it was easy listening for the audio part. It's easy reading. That's a great resource. It just tied together all the other little bits and pieces that I had gathered from other books and other podcasts. That's a great book. I would recommend it to anybody.
What's been your biggest takeaway from that book? What was one of the stories that you really resonated with?
Oh, there's a couple. So one for me was a good example of how to get your mind right about your warm-ups. I think if you look at warm-ups, no matter what class you do, as a tool to build your confidence, right? Your warm-up is there for you to feel more prepared for you to show. I've always told my clients, we have to look at the warm up. And if it's going to do more harm than good, we're not going to do that warm up or we're going to make it different. So, sometimes the trail doesn't get set until late at night. It's crowded. Everybody's stressed out. There's no room. So this is just an example. So I'll talk to my clients and say, hey, here's your scenario. It's 10 o'clock at night and there's 40 people on the course. Would you prefer to omit your warm up? We're going to really take our time and walk the course multiple times in the morning, and we're going to pull some poles aside, and we're just going to drill and just get our rhythm and get our feel over 4 poles and then go show. And I have riders and myself that works better. If you trust your horse, you know your process, the warm-up's just a tool. So there's a story in the book about that. Olympic figure skater Ilya Kulik basically bombed his warm-up the year that he won the gold. And the sportscaster interviewed him after his run or after his routine. Ilya, what about your warm up? Da, da, da. And he said, the warm up doesn't really matter. I was 100% confident that I would deliver the jumps when it was time for me to compete, when it was time for me to go on the ice. The warm up was irrelevant, So I love that because, so many of us get caught like, let's say we go to a horse show before the Congress, many of us will spool, but many of us want that good experience before we go, like, oh, I need to have a good go so my confidence is high. Or, I need to have a good warm up the night before so my confidence is high. It's all what you do with the information. If you make some mistakes and you say, I'm going to learn from that, I'm not going to do that tomorrow, it can be a good thing. So that was just one part of the book. I think if you have your mind right about your warm ups and you just realize it's a tool. If you're confident, the warm up doesn't matter. They had that big senior trail class in Ocala where we weren't allowed to warm up. I was pumped. I was so excited about that. I was like, oh, there's no take all the guesswork out. If I practiced too much, if I practiced not enough, we were all in the same boat. They took all the poles off the property. We weren't allowed to go over any poles for 24 hours before.
Wow.
It's super fun.
Did you at least walk the course?
Oh yeah, we walked.
Okay.
Really spooky. So they were really nice, and they let us lead the horses around for 10 minutes, which was funny.
Oh.
But it was helpful because the decorations were wild. It was like all the show jumping decorations, and they had hot air balloons and dolphins jumping and trees and bushes.
That's awesome.
It took them hours to set up. It was a beautiful course. It was really fun, but I wasn't stressed at all because that's something that I would do frequently at some of our local shows. We had a couple shows where the ground would get hard where they set it, the bugs would come out. So like that's kind of where it started. I had my group and I said, guys, the warm-up is gonna do more harm than good. Your horses know their jobs, you know your job. We're gonna walk in the morning, we're gonna make a plan, we're gonna warm up and get you in your rhythm and get you where you're in that routine, and it's just muscle memory and it's just automatic, and we're gonna go show, and it's not a big deal. So they started realizing, like, I don't have to panic that I didn't do a warm-up. I know my horse, I know what to do. We don't warm up, we don't run the pattern, every single horsemanship at our smaller shows. They wing it. You practice all the maneuvers every day at home, your maneuvers. It's like a good test. So that's just one part of the book that resonated, but there were lots. There were lots of great stories, and it's a great book.
I love that. I want to get more into the books and the podcast and that sort of stuff. But first, I want to ask, how do you find that mentality for the warm up helps the horses?
And I think it's situational, and you need a balance. I mean, you need to be able to go, do a warm up and school your horse, but I think it's good to have the ability to go either way. So my amateurs, they get nervous in traffic. There's a lot of people that get nervous in traffic. It can be, it can be rattling. So I've had a few that those horses have gotten better. The horses got bad in traffic because the riders got uptight. So by not putting them in that situation, they got better and better. And as a result, now some of those horses they're fine in traffic again. I had a few that got bad in traffic for, a small window because their riders really couldn't handle the traffic. And the riders were very vocal and, hey, it's really not my thing. I don't enjoy it. I feel like I'm not getting anything done. So we just have a different plan. So we say, hey, you can come out in the middle of the night with me, or you can come out real early in the morning, or you can choose not to do this warm up at this time. And we're going to warm yourself and warm your horse up, and we're going to walk the course and have a plan, but we are not going to practice the pattern as it is laid out. So that's been beneficial, that the riders have chilled out about it. They're like, oh, I don't have to do a warm up. Like, everybody's different. The point of the warm up is to bolster confidence and to make you feel more prepared to show. So if putting you in the pen with 30 other riders at 10 o'clock at night is going to make you more frazzled for the next day, I don't see the point.
So there's a lot of times where we get to a horse show and we look around and we're like, oh my gosh, Kalina's here, Jonna's here, Carrie's here. How do you coach your clients not to look around the arena and be intimidated by what they see, and to just kind of ride the horse that they have and be the best that they can be?
Sure. And that's normal. That's, human nature. I try to just get them so focused on what they have to do that there's not brain space for it. And sometimes they'll come out and be like, "Oh, I heard your voice in my head nonstop." I'm like, "Oh, sorry about that." And they're like, "No, it's okay." Truly, your brain should be so busy. If you're looking up and worried about it, you're not focused on your job. So I try to just really teach them to ride in rhythm all the time. And we created a little jingle. I teach my riders to count a lot, to just keep that rhythm, that 1, 2, 1, 2. I think one of my ladies just like, stay here, stay here. I'm like, that's great. Whatever resonates with you. So like, everybody has their own little jingle that they kind of like sing to themselves or say to themselves. And if you're doing that, it kind of puts you in a little trance, and it forces you to stay in rhythm, and almost to the point where you have to be like, hey, snap out of it, pay attention over here. That's sort of what I want. I want them to get in a little trance where they're so focused on their job that there isn't room for the other thoughts to leak in. And that kind of goes back to the visualization a little bit. You should be so busy visualizing your next maneuver that you don't have the brain space for, oh my God, look who's over there. But it's easier said than done, for sure. I mean, you have to run your own race, and sometimes I have to remind people of that. But even myself, the depth of talent is so deep in these classes. The horses are so talented, the riders are so talented. So it's easy to look around and be like, oh my God, Sarah's horse is so nice, Blake's horse is so nice, but
Mhm.
I've always done better when I can like focus on my own positive attributes and my own positive things that my horse brings to the table. But we all go through it. my favorite book talks about it a little bit, that once you've achieved some success, it doesn't automatically mean that you're going to be confident for life, you know? It's always a little up and down, and even talking with my friends and colleagues, we all have bad days, and we all have days that, we're down on ourselves, and it's nice to have your friends kinda pick you back up and say, "No, no, you're you're fine," but it's human, and it's important to recognize that that's human, and nobody gets a free pass on that. We all go through it, whether the rest of the world knows it or not.
Yeah, and that's why having just a great community can help make this whole experience so much easier, and, like, having that really strong barn connection to be able to come back to and have a trainer that you trust to be able to say, "Hey, this was really great. You should focus on this," versus, "Hey, you could do a little better here." That kind of honest transparency, but yet still being supportive, like, that gets us through so much.
Yeah, for sure.
Are you looking for that extra competitive edge, struggling with show pen anxiety, or looking to set and achieve meaningful goals with your horse? Schedule a session with me, Lauren, your dedicated mindset coach. As an experienced competitor, I understand the mental demands required to excel at the highest level, and am here to support you in building a plan to help you stay accountable and reaching those goals. For more information, check out laurencervelli.com or click on the website link in our show notes. Let's work together to elevate your ride.
Hi, everyone. It's your personal trainer, Ellie. If you're looking to become a stronger, more balanced, and flexible rider, I'm here to help. I offer virtual personal training sessions and customized workout plans that you can complete on your own. As a fellow competitor, I understand the physical demands riding requires, and my goal is to help you perform your best for your horse, whether you're preparing for a show or just want to improve your everyday rides. Visit lopendowntherailfitness.com or click on my website tab in the notes of this podcast episode to learn more. Let's work together to elevate your ride.
So, what do you do if you have a client who has nailed the warm up? They nail kind of staying really focused, and they're good at keeping their minds busy, both at the barns and once they're on their horse's back. But once they step into the show pen, they kind of go blank. How would you coach someone through that?
Yeah, that's tricky. I think it's about the weight of the moment, right? It's really important. So deep down, we know that we're not being judged during the warm up. And
Yeah.
it's real easy to be focused. And then it's like, there's all those jokes about what happens to your brain when you get to Kone. We know it's important. So our body, there's a physiological response, and it's hard to carry that over. I think it's a little bit about saturation. The more you do it, like, it's just a novelty at first, right? Like, if you've only been to the Congress or the World Show once or twice, it's a big deal. So the more you can go to those big shows and show in those arenas, it gets easier and easier, and the more at home you feel and the more at ease you feel. And then I'm not going to say eventually it feels like you're showing in your backyard. When you do it enough, and it should get easier. I think the more muscle memory you have, the better. And ultimately, I think all of your top athletes have to operate there, so that if you're a little nervous, your systems are automatic. And I like, when I show, most of the stuff I'm doing is really automatic. I've just done it so many times. So I definitely don't get as nervous as I was younger, but every once in a while it'll creep up, even at a random show that's not big. Every once in a while, I'll be like, "Oh, my heart rate's up a little bit. That's weird. Where did that come from?" It's a little unsettling. My friends, every once in a while they'll be like, "Yeah, my hand was shaking today. That's weird," but that's human. That's normal. So I think that the more you can make all your processes automatic, that system takes over, and you're just going to do it. It's so your brain's kind of out of it, if that makes sense.
So, how do you help clients get those reps in and develop that muscle memory if maybe they live far away or they can't ride their horse very often? Like, do you recommend that they work out? Do you have them like kind of practice things like when they're at home? Like, do you have any sort of system for that?
Yeah, it's a little situational. I've got some clients that live, 45 minutes away and can come ride 2 or 3 times a week, and I've got some that live overseas. So I think that it's important that the work they do is repetitious so that they get comfortable, and that's a little bit dependent upon the level of the rider. Earlier in my career, with my novice riders, I wouldn't let them warm up a lot because typically, that would make too many withdrawals with their horse, so I would let them warm up and get a feel for the course, and, okay, that's good for you, and as they get better, there's a moment where, like, I have to just let go. I'm a little bit of a control freak, and, there's a moment where you have to let go and say they have to practice, they have to make it theirs, and it's gonna be messy for a minute, but that's part of the process of getting better, and then ultimately I like them to do maneuvers repetitiously, not until they get it right, but until they can't get it wrong, and I like them to just do it. I encourage them to make mistakes. I encourage them to, stay on one element, stay on the wheel until you love it, through all the whoops, through all the too far left, too far right, too big, had a chip, whatever. They need to do it in all the conditions. It's like driving. When I was young, when I was learning how to drive, I was nervous the first time I got on the highway. I was nervous the first time I drove in snow. I was nervous the first time I drove a stick. But, fast forward, now I drive my 6 horse through New York City, talking on the phone, drinking a coffee, driving with my knee, like and they just need to do it. And I don't want to say safe space, but like they just need to feel like they're not going to get in trouble, and it's okay. I encourage them to make mistakes. I tell them, listen, if you can give me the opposite ends of the spectrum, we can find just right. So if you're constantly giving me too little, I'm going to make a game of it and say, hey, give me too much, or vice versa. And they just need to do whatever it is until it feels like your favorite sweatshirt, or it feels like driving home. And that's the hard part. We don't really have the luxury of doing that. Typically in a trail warm up, it's like, okay, do your obstacle. That was good. Next obstacle. Well, it's hard to feel familiar when you do that, and it's erratic. You're transitioning, boom, next, boom, next. So just my style, when the crowd allows and when the warm up situation allows, or when we're at home, I want you to do your trot overs, do your trot drills, trot, 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 till you love it, till you're home there, till it's comfortable. Okay, great. Now go do your lope, slope, lope, lope. Just do it and do it and do it until they're comfortable, and they're comfortable with the subtle nuances and the subtle variables that you're going to experience, like driving your car. You're going to have to learn how to drive in snow and rain and fog, and eventually you get comfortable, with the different conditions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good comparison as well because, we all started off and we all remember how nerve-wracking it was. And like you said, now we can be doing 10 things at once and it's a no-brainer for us. Can you talk a
Yeah.
little bit about the research that you've kind of dove into in regards to muscle memory and how that plays into showing our horses?
Yeah, and I'm just, I'm busy. We're all busy. So it's exciting, but it's still new for me. So, when I get free time or when I'm on my really long drives to the course shows, I'm always trying to listen to new material. So there was a podcast. His name is Joel Turner, on the Joe Rogan Experience, and his program is Shot IQ. My boyfriend does a lot of archery, and I don't know if you would call it a program or a system, and it's to combat a thing called target panic, but it correlates to what we do a little bit. So that was maybe a year or 2 ago I started listening to that, and that's fascinating if you can get through it. If you're interested in archery or any type of firearms, it's gonna appeal to you a little bit more. If you're not, you might not be able to get through it. But it's a real thing. So these professional archers and people that go to these, I think they have their biggest competition is in Vegas. They basically have to shoot a target the size of a penny from 20 yards away 60 times in a row. So
Wow.
talk about nerves. Imagine when you're up to
Yeah.
39 or 40. Imagine when you're up to 58 and you've hit that sucker 58 times in a row and you have to do it 2 more. That's like you've gotten
Wow.
through your finals pattern clean and you have 2 more poles to walk over. Your heart's beating out of your chest because you've had a great go. So it correlates a lot. And when you shoot a bow or you shoot a firearm, it's explosive, right? So your brain does not want your body to be surprised. It doesn't want you to feel that explosion. So people jerk the trigger. And it's a real thing with archery, with firearms. So this guy had researched and figured out a way to kind of retrain your process. So that's when I first started getting into it, and there's a whole lot to it. That's one source that was really interesting for me. But fast forward, he got hired to work with a pitching coach of a major league baseball team. It has all sorts of applications. He talks a little bit about open loop and closed loop processes. I kind of threw those words out there earlier. Open loop is when it's automatic, there's flow. It'd be like swinging your golf club or pitching a baseball or swinging at a baseball. It happens so fast and it's so fluid, you can't really stop or alter it. It's just automatic. So, like when we learn to ride, there's a very cognitive portion of that where you get a lot of information. It'd be like learning a dance. In the beginning, it's awkward and it's, a lot of left foot, right foot. It doesn't flow. Once you memorize the dance and you're comfortable with it, it's open loop, it's automatic. So he talks a lot about that and how to basically retrain yourself on some of these processes that are already in place. So that was pretty interesting if you can get through the archery part of it. That was the first one that I listened to, and it was really interesting, that target panic. And, I was telling one of my students about it. And she said, that's me. That's what I do when I see a trail pole. I run at it. I punch the trigger. Like, yeah, same. She gets excited. She gets buck fever, like she wants it. She wants to do well. It's like
Mhm.
she wants that big win, and her heart gets racing and she sees a big spot and she's like, I got it. you know? I used to do the same thing a lot. I still have to control myself. I rode hunters when I was young, so I see big spots and I run at stuff frequently.
Yeah, that's my favorite way to do it too. Not always the best way, but it's my
Yeah.
natural state.
Well, I mean, I grew up jumping, and you don't ever stop in front of a fence. You just don't do it. You don't stop and back up. You have to make it work. If you miss your spot when you're jumping, you go to the hospital. Like you can't split a fence. Like you're leaving big or you're chipping, but you best be going over.
So how did you kind of bridge that gap of being able to not just jump all the time?
Yeah, so that was like I needed more mental control. That was I knew I started figuring out that was my trend. So I think identifying your trends and your horse's trends, I guess it's just about being introspective and just like, you know, hey, what do I need to work on about myself? So my friends would often joke about it. And I actually so what really made me finally start to fix it years ago, I had a friendly wager, or I was about to get into a friendly wager with Gino. We were at a local show, and I had a really good green horse at the time. And I don't know how it came about, but we had a wager, and I needed to beat him, and he was going to try to beat me. And that day, it was a lope over in the back half of the course, and my friends and some of my customers just joke to this day. They're like, "You were like 17 feet away, like you saw your spot from the you thought you saw your spot from the start cone." I mean, it was a disaster. I mean, I ran at it, missed, and
Oh, no.
yeah, it was terrible. And Gino's laughing and he's like, "Oh, couldn't handle the pressure of our bet, huh?" So I said, that was a really good test. And I couldn't. I got excited. I got excited, and my heart started racing. And so that's when I realized I needed to chill out a little bit and work on that.
How did you work on it? Like, what do you remember what specifically you did to work through that?
I think it all probably started happening at the same time that I was like just, trying to improve my mental game. And it was all around about the same time. But that was a big mistake. I've always said the bigger the mistake and the bigger the stage, the less apt you are to make it again. It stinks
Mhm.
in the moment. Nobody wants to have a huge screw up at a big horse show. And this wasn't a big horse show, but it was, it was subtly embarrassing. We joke about it, but that's not what I wanted to have happen. So I just stored it, and just my trend is to run at things. So I needed to work on waiting. I overdid it. I said I need to chip. I need to stop, I need to back up, I need to slow down because my default is going to be to run at it.
So did you just start doing that more at home, like, with all your horses? Like, how did you actually overcome
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, and then, my boyfriend was a pretty good influence on me because he's the opposite. He has a pleasure horse background, so he would do a lot of, like, stop, back up, and, I was like, "Huh, I don't think I've ever stopped and backed up in front of a pole," because I come from a jumping background,
Yeah,
so it's
yeah.
like it just didn't make sense to me. I make my spot work and they have to go over, and there's pros and cons to both of those things. So he was a good influence, and he forced me to be a little more structured, and it balanced my weaknesses. So I think just really having the ability to take a microscope to yourself and really look at what are you need to know what your positive attributes are, but you also need to look at what your weaknesses are so you can work on them. On the flip side, talking about your positive attributes, that was one other big takeaway from my favorite book I just talked about. We have a customer that's a executive level coach. She's a doctor. She's a really, really smart, funny, intelligent woman. And she's helped me with this project a lot. And when I was sharing it with her, she told me that part of my process is an actual process that's already in place, that she's been to workshops and she coaches some of her clients. And what that is having I call it a highlight reel, but it's basically you're encouraged to have a bank, so to speak, of all your positive imagery and all of your very best work, basically. And I think that's another really big component to having confidence in the show pen and being able to get yourself in the right frame of mind to execute at a high level. You have to believe in yourself. So it's good to have at your disposal, images or pictures of your very best rides, your very best work, and just keep it kind of close at hand in your mind so that you can call upon it. When you're getting ready to show at a big show, you want to feel good, you want to feel confident. You don't want to think about the past mistakes you made. You want to throw that away and you want to be thinking, "Hey, I can do this." Remember this great ride that I had 3 weeks ago or whatever. But that's one more pretty important component.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about the mental mastery workshop that you have coming up. And can you give us a little insight into what you're going to be covering for it?
Sure. So it's sort of broken down into 3 parts, and it is a work in progress for me. So I'm going to see what works. And I'm pretty excited about the feedback that I'll get from people. I think the more people you talk to, you figure out you gain more tools. I mean, every person you talk to, you're going to find out what works for them and what doesn't work for them. And that's just a bonus. So the first part of the workshop is just going to be science, facts, and true stories. Basically, I'm hoping I can be a liaison or, like, offer Cliff's notes, basically. There's so much content out there, but I'm hoping that I've been able to sort through and kind of figure out what works for me and some of my favorite things that resonate with me and share that. So, science, facts, true stories, and then part 2 is going to be about visualization and manifesting. And then part 3 is just going to be my toolbox. I've got, 7 or 8 things that are in my toolbox that I think are valuable that I use. That doesn't mean it's gonna work for everybody, but I'm hoping as I go, and I'm sure that as I go, I'll develop more tool. So that's kind of my outline.
Can you give us a sneak peek as to what one of those tools might be?
Okay, just one small tool would be using sounds to kind of trigger and train the correct neural pathways. So you have to recognize your trends again. So if I've got a rider that's a little stuck and they get a little tight and they maybe need to learn how to sometimes cue faster, well, I'll make them cluck fast or kiss fast. No different than if I have a rider that is a little bit too passive and they have a hard time making their horse stop squarely because they're just not clear. Most of the time, those riders don't say whoa. So that's just what I found in my own experience. So I try to make them say, whoa. It's really hard to be wishy-washy when you're like not yelling whoa, but when you're being loud and clear and you're saying whoa, it's harder to cue soft and slow and sloppy. And I've got a
Yeah.
few riders that ride a little too deliberate. They're just like a little slow and they want to kind of push their leg and leave it there. And I'm like, hey, your horse is camped out on your foot a little bit. Let's move it a little faster. But they have a hard time. They want to just push, push, push. So I'll make them cluck fast or kick fast because of, your brain is going to encourage your body to move in that frequency. That's just one little tool that's worked well for me, and you have to find what works for you. And there's a zillion different ways to do it, but just take a piece here, a piece there from whoever and whatever source you find.
I'd
I love
never
that. That's a great
Yeah.
tool.
I'd never thought about putting sound and, like, the intensity of the sound relating to what you're going to get your body to do, but it makes total sense. Thank you for listening to Elevate Your Ride. Find us on Instagram and Facebook, all linked in the podcast notes. We'll see you next time. The information provided by Elevate Your Ride is for educational and informational purposes only and is not intended as medical or professional advice. While we discuss health and fitness topics related to equestrians, the content provided through this podcast is not a substitute for professional advice. The views expressed by the host and guests on Elevate Your Ride are their own and should not be taken as professional guidance. We strive to provide accurate and up to date information, but we cannot guarantee that the information will be applicable to every individual listener or that it reflects the most current research or guidelines. Before making any changes to your health and fitness routine, we strongly recommend consulting with a qualified professional who can provide personalized advice based on your individual needs and circumstances. Elevate Your Ride and its creators will not be liable for any direct, indirect, consequential, special, exemplary, or other damages arising from the use of information on this podcast. Thank you for listening to Elevate Your Ride. We are committed to providing high quality content and appreciate your trust in us as a source of information for your health and fitness journey.